Are you tired of setting goals that you never achieve? Well, what if I told you that the way in which you set your goals can actually determine whether you stay motivated or whether you stay unmotivated? Welcome to Become Your Own Therapist, the channel where I try to share the psychological science so that you can use this information to help yourself without needing therapy or medication. And today we're talking about how to set goals that will keep you motivated. I mean, tell me if you can relate to this, right? You have a moment in your life where you suddenly feel inspired to achieve the things that you've always dreamt about. And then for some or other reason, you suddenly start to lack that motivation once you've set the goals, once all the planning is done, and once all the inspiration has faded. If you can relate to that, if you can relate to feeling inspired and setting goals and then suddenly feeling burdened by them, then I think this video is for you. And we're going to go over 7 tips on how to set goals in a specific way according to research that will help you stay motivated, stay inspired, and keep you moving toward those goals. I'm getting the information from this article called Goal Setting Theory of Motivation. It's a really good article. And goal setting theory, which I'll get to in a bit, was created by Edwin Locke and Gary Latham, 2 experts in the field of goal setting. And what they did is they took 400 scientific studies and they consolidated the information into one elegant theory, into one elegant model that we can use to set goals that keep us inspired, that keep us motivated, that keep us wanting to chase those things that we dream about. So before I get into the 7 tips on how exactly to achieve your goals and how to set goals in a way that keep you motivated, I think it's important just to go through goal setting theory just for about 5 minutes, just to give you a bit of context about what we're speaking about here. So, as I said, developed by 2 of the world's leading experts in goal setting, and the theory basically says that if we want to get ourselves to stay motivated to achieve our goals, then we have to think about where goals come from. And to understand where goals come from, you have to differentiate between values and goals, because values come before goals. We think that it starts with us setting a goal, but actually, if you think about it, there's something that happens just before that, which is values. Values are things that you care about, and a lot of that is built into us just by virtue of being human and our biology, but a lot of it is down to our personality and the kind of person you are. So for example, if you value being compassionate, then to go against that value would grate up against you. If I told you to be rude to someone and you value being compassionate and empathic, that's going to be very uncomfortable for you. And that's not because you set a goal to be compassionate. It's not even because you were maybe conscious of that value, but it's because somewhere deep inside you that value exists. The value in compassion and value in being that kind of person. So values are a bit more fundamental than goals. And to understand the way in which we set our goals, we first have to understand what our values are, because we set goals based on our values, and it's better if those 2 are aligned. Okay, so that first bullet says that there are 2 cognitive determinants of behavior. Cognitive is a fancy German word for thinking. So these are 2 ways of thinking that help us move our behavior towards something. So values help us move toward things and goals help us move toward things. But as I said, it's better to stack your goals on top of your values. That's when you're going to get the most motivation to achieve those goals, because they're in line with how you naturally are and what you naturally care about. So that's very important to understand. The second thing that's important to understand is once you set a goal on top of a value, then suddenly that goal directs your attention and it directs your action. So our goals start to dictate the ways in which we act and the things that we pay attention to. An example of this is, imagine that you are walking down a street and you are hungry and your goal is to eat. So the value there, the more emotive bit, is feeling hunger. The goal you stack on top of that is to find a place to eat. And so as you're walking down the street, your attention is going to be looking for restaurants, for open signs, for menus. Your attention will also be directed to certain smells in the environment. If you smell some good food coming down from the store across the street, your attention will be captured by that because your goal is to find a place to eat. Now, if your goal while walking down the street is to get home, for example, you've had a long night and your goal is just to get home, you're not going to be looking at those stores, menus, signs for restaurants. You're not going to be walking in a way that where you maze around the town to find a place to eat. You're going to be looking for the direct path home, the quickest path, and you're going to walk a bit faster, and you're not going to be paying attention to places where you can eat. You might be, but not as much, maybe. So that's what this means here. According to goal setting theory, once we set a goal, we have to acknowledge that our attention and the ways in which we act are going to be captured by that goal. So a lot of our psychology is going to be molded around the goals that we set for ourselves. This is going to be important, as you'll see in the 7 tips that I'm going to share now. And then the final element of this model is that once you have set the goal, and once you either achieve it or fail to achieve it, that can have a consequence in terms of your motivation and whether you continue pursuing the goal or not. So the goal here, if you are struggling to achieve the thing that you've set out to achieve, that might actually feed back negatively into your motivation and make you less likely to pursue that goal. So that's a very important part as well. And again, you'll see it's sort of built into the 7 tips that I'm going to share with you. So without any further ado, let's get into it with number 1. The first thing I'd like you to do, if you are trying to set goals and stay motivated at the same time, is to be specific about what your goals are. We perform at higher levels when we are clear about what we want. Let's say, you're the kind of person who, when you're trying to achieve a goal, you tell yourself, I should work harder, I should stay motivated, I should stay inspired. Well, according to this theory, that sort of self-talk is not as helpful as actually just spending time clarifying what you want. Think about it in this way. If you're surrounded by mist and I tell you to head to a specific location and you don't know where that location is, it doesn't matter if you have energy to run. It doesn't matter if you have the legs to run. It doesn't matter if you have the will to run. You're not going to be able to run effectively toward your destination. So get out of the mist, clear up the mist, and once you see specifically where your goal is it here, is it there, is it somewhere else, then you'll be able to chart the most direct path toward that goal, and you'll be able to run toward it. So that's where the motivation comes in clarity. Clarity gets us motivated because we now know where we're headed and we know the steps that need to be taken to get there. So think about your goals for a second. Just pause and think about your goals in any life domain. It's going to be social, occupational, spiritual, whatever you're thinking about. But I'd like you to assess the goals that you have in terms of their clarity and their specificity. Are your goals clear enough? Are they specific enough? I'll give you some examples here. If your goal is to become more fit, it's not clear enough. Becoming fit is extremely vague and misty. Fitness can mean a lot of different things. Fitness can mean being able to bench press 50 kgs. It can mean being able to complete a 21-kilometer run within a specific time. It can mean being able to play a 90-minute soccer game. So it's very important to be specific in that sort of way. I'll give you another example. If your goal is to have better relationships, that is too vague. Try to quantify it in some way. Try to make it more specific. You could do that by saying, my goal is to connect to someone I care about for at least an hour once a week. So at least an hour, once a week, someone I care about. Those are all the criteria for achieving this goal. And it's very clear compared to I want better relationships. See, that lack of clarity, I want better relationships, doesn't get you mobilized and motivated because you don't know where to go. You're still in the mist. So how can you be motivated to run? Okay, so that is the first step. The second goal here is to make your goals challenging. This one is a bit counterintuitive because most of us think that it's the really challenging goals that make us feel demotivated because we feel like we could never achieve them. But according to goal setting theory and according to psychological science, if your goal isn't challenging enough, it actually leads to demotivation. Now, take a moment to think about why that might be. Why would it be that having a goal that is easy could actually lead us to not feeling as motivated to try to move toward it? And I think the answer for that is that we need to feel challenged for our resources to be activated. It's almost like a challenging goal is the key that unlocks the potential that we have within us. And just by virtue of being human beings, we don't rise to we can't activate the resources we need to rise to a challenge if there is no challenge. So if this is you, if your goals are too easy and you're still not fulfilling them, it could be, the problem might not be that they are not clear enough, but rather that you need to actually amp up the volume in terms of your goal. You need to make it a bit more challenging so that you can arise to the occasion and so that you can, according to goal setting theory, mobilize and activate those resources. Now, I have to put in a disclaimer here because even though there's the danger of your goals being too easy, there's also the danger of your goals being too hard. That can be extremely demotivating. I'm sure you have the experience of setting a goal for yourself and it's just so hard that it just takes the wind out of your sails. You feel like, what's the point? I'm never going to be able to achieve this. I'm never going to be able to do this. Maybe it's not for me. Feeling like an imposter. All of those symptoms represent the danger on the other side. And the danger on the other side being, I can't get to that goal. I just can't do it. It's too difficult for me. So, big disclaimer here, even though it has to be challenging, you need to make sure that however challenging it is, you know in your heart that you are capable of achieving that. And you can't just believe it. There has to be some sort of proof that it is that you are capable of it. So moving on to the third tip here to keep yourself motivated with your goals is that your goals need to be accepted. And by accepted, I mean accepted by you. So they must be your decision and you must accept the cost of pursuing those goals. They need to be your decision and you need to be aware of the costs and you need to accept those costs. There'll always be costs to pursuing your goals. You need to be able to accept the costs and you need to know that the goal is coming from you. A lot of our goals seem like ours on the surface, but in actual fact, they belong to other people. I once had a client who spent almost a decade of her life pursuing a job within a business that was highly technical, very numbers oriented, very quantitative. And she had spent over a decade pursuing this goal and she was really struggling to get there and it was just an uphill battle. And in our first session together, we discussed why she wants that job. Does she enjoy it? And she said she doesn't. She doesn't enjoy it. And she realized that she had only been pursuing that for such a long time because she thought that was what would make her parents most proud. And after she actually spoke to her parents about this, her parents said, no, we just want you to be happy. And being happy and enjoying her work was also what she wanted. But for over 10 years, she had not realized that she had been putting in the grind for something that she didn't even want. So that goal was never hers. So what, you might ask, got her to be able to spend 10 years worth of effort and energy and studying and assessments toward a goal that she didn't even want? Well, according to goal setting theory, it is the fact that she set that goal, so it mobilized her toward trying to achieve that. So she was, if we go back to the first two tips, she was specific about what she wanted, and she knew that that goal was challenging. So it was specific and it was challenging, but it wasn't hers. So the goal wasn't actually accepted by her. Okay. So you need to make sure that you are not in that situation. You need to make sure that you are setting goals that are for you, that don't come from your parents, and that don't come from trying to live someone else's dream, that don't come from trying to make someone else proud, or by doing something you feel you are expected to do because of your age or your gender or whatever else. You need to do something that will make you happy, because that is what will keep you motivated. If I go back to this client, once we realized that she never wanted that, she told me the kind of job that she would actually enjoy, and she was brave enough to actually pursue that. And once she got the position at a new company, she no longer needs motivation. She no longer even explicitly needs to set goals, because she just enjoys what she does. She's just naturally and intrinsically motivated. So make sure that your goals are accepted by you, because that is definitely the most comprehensive way to be able to bypass all these issues with motivation. Cool. So moving on to the fourth tip here, which is feedback is important. Feedback, while trying to pursue your goals, can actually keep you motivated. It's easier to stay motivated when you're getting feedback because it creates momentum. Suddenly, it's not just this huge goal far into the future that you're trying to pursue on a daily basis, but rather that goal is broken up into many little subparts, right? An example here is, think about school. If you went to school, you'll know that at the beginning of the year, when you collect your new textbooks for the subjects that you have, you will know that you aren't just given those textbooks and then told that you'll be assessed on all that material at the end of the year. You're assessed on a quarterly basis. You're assessed in the middle of the year. Sometimes you have a trial assessment close to the end of the year. You have little class tests in between. There are all sorts of ways in which you are assessed and which your progress is measured, and you're constantly getting feedback. You do that first quarter test and you think, oh shoot, I really struggled in this section and I need to brush up on that. Those are little doses of motivation. And the motivation can work if the feedback is good or if the feedback is bad. It just depends on whether you're willing to take on feedback as a whole, because feedback as a whole can be good for you in terms of keeping you motivated. So the point here is that when you are setting goals, in order to stay motivated with your goals, make sure that you've set up systems in which you can constantly receive feedback. Think about if there are any natural ways in which you can receive feedback. I know people who are losing weight, for example, a natural form of feedback would be measuring how much they weigh. That's naturally going to occur, that sort of feedback. But if you are in a situation where you're not naturally getting feedback on your goals, then you need to create ways in which you can get feedback. If you're trying to improve your communication skills, you can, after giving presentations, ask people how you did and if there's anything you can improve on. That's a way of creating a little system to allow for feedback, and that feedback is what's going to keep you motivated, because you'll have all these little steps that you're constantly moving toward, and you'll be putting one foot in front of the other. And that's the essence of motivation. So that's why feedback is important. Another important tip here is deadlines. Deadlines can also keep you motivated. I'm sure you've all had this experience of having a deadline for an assignment or some sort of project or test, and you're working for a month before this on the project or test, and your progress is super slow. Maybe you don't even look at the assessment until that weekend, just before the Monday where you have to submit your assignment. And then suddenly, in a day's time, you get done more than you did in the past 30 days. What happened there in a situation like that? Well, according to goal setting theory, what happened there was that the deadline mobilized your resources. The deadline activated you and got you motivated. So, what this means for you is when you are setting goals, you need to make sure that you're setting deadlines too. Don't just think of deadlines as a big deadline for the actual goal, and once you achieve that deadline, you've achieved the whole goal. You can set that sort of deadline for a specific time by which you should have achieved this goal, but also break down the goal into smaller deadlines. If your goal is to get a new job, you need a deadline for when you're going to start looking for jobs. You need a deadline for when you're going to have applied to one job. You need a deadline for when you're going to have applied to 10 jobs. You need a deadline for when you have gotten your CV sorted. All these sorts of little deadlines, again, will help keep you motivated. Deadlines can mobilize us according to goal setting theory. Then we're going to look at tip 6, which is to be learning oriented, not performance oriented. It's important to fall in love with the learning process. And the reason for that is good luck trying to achieve anything without being in love with that learning process. I mean, think about how you've achieved goals your whole life. A really good example here is go back to being an infant. Maybe you don't remember being an infant, but just think about what infants have to do to learn to walk. Right. Did you know that an infant falls down per day 38 times while trying to walk? That's a lot. Okay. And that might be a lot more than you're willing to fall down on in achieving your goals. Are you willing to fall down 38 times a day and then still get up and still keep trying to put one foot in front of the other? Because you see, I'm not asking you to do anything that you haven't done before. I'm not asking you to activate any sort of resource or any ability that you already haven't done at the age of 2. You've done this. That's how you learned to walk. You allowed yourself to be in love with the process. You allowed yourself to be inspired by each foot that you've put in front of the other, and you've allowed yourself to keep getting up every time you fell down. This is what it means to be in love with the learning process. To be in love with the learning process means to enjoy falling on your bottom, and to enjoy getting up again, and to enjoy being wobbly as you're moving toward your goal. And research shows that people who are oriented in this way, people who are learning oriented rather than performance oriented, actually achieve their goals more often. And that's because, can you imagine being performance oriented? Let's say you want to get a distinction for your matric year, and then in the first quarter you fail one of your modules. Can you imagine being performance oriented and only caring about the outcome and looking at the 30% that you achieved on that module? Can you imagine how that just captures your attention and demotivates you? We're speaking about how to stay motivated here. And the best way to stay motivated is to become a lover of the learning process, to learn how to not take stumbles as failures, and to learn how to fall in love with acquiring skills, the process of becoming a master, of practicing. There can be real enjoyment in that. If you are a sports player and you are on the pitch and you're playing a friendly game, you're not in a tournament, and it's not about the outcome in that moment, then you can have fun on the pitch. You can go all out, and you can explore, and you can be creative in your play, and you can push yourself and test your limits. And that's what it means to be learning oriented. And then tip number 7 is to set goals in groups too, because this also increases productivity. Research shows that people who set goals in groups are actually more likely to stick to the goal and more likely to stay motivated. So think about if your goal is to do some running, then join a running group and, as a group decide the group is going to do a half marathon by middle next year. Doing things like that can actually cause you to now have accountability partners, and every time someone else is pursuing their goal, you also become motivated to join in. And then that just multiplies. The motivation multiplies within the group. Almost everything we do in society is group oriented, so this wouldn't be too hard. I mean, think about it. We're very social. We don't live alone in our cabins. If you think about how society is structured, we don't have a social media. In other words, like anti-social media. We have social media. We're always looking for ways to connect. So might as well see if you can let your goals filter into these spaces of connection so that you can then use the groups that you're in to stay motivated. So that is, there's an important disclaimer here with these 7 tips that I've just shared, which is sometimes we're unmotivated because we are feeling depressed, because our mood is low. It's a very common symptom of depression to feel unmotivated and to not really care about goals or to want to even move toward goals. Now, if that is you, I would recommend that you go beyond these 7 tips and you check out this video that I recently did where I explain how to use behavioral activation to overcome depression. Because if your motivation problem is the result of a low mood, then these 7 tips can be helpful, but you actually need to address this a bit more at the root cause. So I'll see you in that video.